All right, good evening. Welcome to the Sukkah Chol Moed edition of Daf Yomi in Reb Jeff Sukkah. Thank you very much for hosting.
Pleasure.
Today's Daf Yomi is sponsored by, again, what's your name? Mordechai Moshe Ben Aryeh. In honor of this year, in honor of me in this year, and thank you very much. We really greatly appreciate it, and thank you to the Walds for providing the amazing nosh and spread. And we're ready to go. 4 lines up from where the lines get wide. Yud Daled Amud Aleph. We had for those coming in, Reb Shimon had told us out of the 4 required sections of service of each sacrifice. We've got to slaughter it. We've got to catch the blood. We've got to bring the blood to the mizbeach, to the altar, and then we've got to sprinkle it. Out of those, says Rabbi Shimon, bringing it to the mizbeach is not required. Why? There's a possibility that you could slaughter your sacrifice right next to the mizbeach, in which case you don't have any place to bring it. Because of that, since you can skip that service. If you have the wrong intent during that part of the service, it can't invalidate it. That's what Rabbi Shimon says. So, Amar Rava says, Imtim Tzoloma Rabbi Shimon Savar La Kibrei. Now, it could be that Rabbi Shimon might hold like his son. His son is Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. And his son holds, De Amar, he holds, Beina Ulam V'Lamazbeach Tzafon. He holds that, in many of the sacrifices that we're going to be discussing, this courtyard area, right? This is the Beis HaMikdash courtyard area. Many of the korbanos, not every one of the korbanos, have to be sacrificed in the northern part of this courtyard. The northern part, we're looking east is that way, west is that way, north is facing me, south is facing the camera. So the north part is this section over here. Now, there are 3 different viewpoints as to what constitutes north, right? Viewpoint 1 is directly opposite the Mizbeach. There's a strip directly opposite the Mizbeach. That's north. Another opinion is north is every place from the doorway of the Ulam, this section which comes out, right? The Beis HaMikdash is shaped sort of like, a T, right? Like a T. This section here is the Ulam. It's wider than the Beis HaMikdash section, comes out from the Beis HaMikdash, an extra 15 amos on each side. So this Ulam section from the doorway to the Mizbeach, that's still north. And then there's yet another viewpoint that says that the north continues all the way up here. This section, this little line here, there's stairs. It's hard to be able to see, but on my model you can see the stairs. This section is where the Yisraelim could stand, and they would bring their korbanos. The Kohanim could stand from here onward. I got dust on it. My model has dust on it, sorry. It's been on top of the bookshelf. So this section here is where the Kohanim stand. You can see there are little loops and things on the floor here. We'll talk about what those are and how they hold the animals down, and the tables where they would skin the animals were over here. But this is the north side, or is the north side up here, or is the north side the entire section to the north of the front of the altar? Those are our 3 perspectives. So, yeah.
Where are the Levium? I'm a Levi.
Oh, so the Levium were present around in the section where the Yisraelim could go as well. They stood most of the time. They did their singing. There's a big staircase that's over these 3 stairs that were here. They stood almost like they had like choir bleachers, and that's where they performed. They had right here in the front, right here where these stairs were. They would stand along there. We're going to learn all about it. I don't want to get too much into the details of some of those things, but you say they're right. Yeah, they're there.
You were said like a cattle choir.
We're going to see also where the Levium stood guard and watch in different places and different towers and different places around as well. But okay, here's where we are. So if he holds like his son, that he says Beina Ulam V'Lamizbeach Tzafon, that his son holds that this part of the Beis HaMikdash between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, right? This again the Ulam, this is the Mizbeach. That's north. Ein machshava mo'eles beholeches chatos hapnimios. It's possible, right, that there's no holacha. There's no, he says that when you have to carry the blood, if there's a sacrifice, you have to carry the blood. So then that could invalidate. He said that when, let's say we had, for example, if you had the dipping service, whether you can have the wrong mindset with dipping the finger. Okay, well, that means that it's possible that holacha could be required for an inside the Beis Hamikdash sacrifice, where it might not be required for an outside the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because you could slaughter the animal right next to the Mizbeach where the blood is going to be sprinkled. But if it's a sacrifice where the blood has to be sprinkled inside the Beis Hamikdash, you have to carry it from the place where it's being slaughtered into the Beis Hamikdash.
Right. That's only the chatos, right?
Only the chatos pnimius, right? That's the internal. Right. That is also we had the chatos of the Pareh Davar and the chatos of the Kohen Gadol, right? Those were bull offerings. Those were the only ones that were sprinkled inside. So he says there would be no since it could be slaughtered right there. If it was slaughtered over here, this holacha is unnecessary. From here to the door of the Beis Hamikdash would be unnecessary because you can slaughter it right here. Therefore, the only location where slaughtering would be relevant is Elomi Pesach Ulam Vilifnim, is only holacha from the opening of the door till you get into the inside, because you couldn't slaughter on the inside. Rashi interestingly says that it's not derech eretz to slaughter on the inside. It seems that Rashi is actually implying that if you did slaughter inside the Beis Hamikdash, the korban would not be puzzle. It would just be wrong to do it. Therefore, since we don't slaughter inside the Beis Hamikdash, the only holacha that we have to worry about, the only carrying of the blood that is required, is going to be from the door of the Beis Hamikdash inward. Everything else wouldn't be necessary. Only if he holds like his son, right? If he holds like other opinions, then V'im timtzul amar savalak Rabbi Yehuda, and if he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, da'amar toch azara mikdash. If he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that inside of the Azara, inside of the entire courtyard, is the holy area. So then, ein machshava mo'elas balachs siluk bazichin. Then, when we have an obligation to when we each week when we change the lechem apanim, when we change the showbread. So there are spoons that had incense that would be laid on the table and stay there all week. Every week, when they would change the showbread, they would take those spoons filled with incense out, and they would bring it to the Mizbeach in order for the incense to be burned. So, he says that if the entire Azara is considered Mikdash, so then the removal of the bazichin of these spoons is Elomi Pesach Eicho V'Lachutz. Then that means the only place. I want to make sure I do say this right.
Bazichin, those like special spoons.
The place of burning was outside of was on the outside of the ulam. So therefore, he says. Right. Oh, so he's saying so like this. If he says that the Azara is Kamikdash, which means that according to him, the entire floor area of the courtyard can be used to burn sacrifices. Okay, that's the key element.
Bazichin, that was like a special spoon they used?
Yeah, it was like the bazichin is they're like little ladles. They're spoons with long handles. Okay, so you could burn. That means that you could burn any of the korbanos that have to be burnt on the mizbeach. Could be burnt on the floor of this whole area. Theoretically, you're not supposed to, but if you do, it's fine. That means that if you took the incense out of the Beis Hamikdash and you walked into the courtyard and burned it right there on the floor, it would be fine. Which means that from the time that you exited the ulam, from the time that you exited the front door, none of the extra holacha, if you walk to the altar, is unnecessary because you could just burn it right there. So therefore, he says that from the opening of the heichal, now the heichal, this is this section minus this extra piece up front. This is the heichal, ends here. This is the ulam. So from the end of the heichal, right, there was a doorway that went out of the heichal into the ulam, and then there's another section. Then this is a skinny section. Then comes out of the ulam, you come out the front. So from the time that you exited the heichal, that would be leaving the Beis Hamikdash. Only time that holacha is required is from the edge of the heichal to the end of the ulam, this little piece right here, walking that piece. Because once you got outside, you could have burned it right on the floor. And before you walked to the doors, you could have had the shulchan right up against the outside doors of the Beis Hamikdash too. So the only time the only transportation required is the space in between. That's it, right? Now, if he's of the opinion, and we're going to learn all of these opinions, that says that, you know what, the holiness of this ulam, of this section, is equivalent to the holiness of the inside of the of the Beis Hamikdash. Well, if that's the case, then that means your shulchan could have been placed inside of the ulam. Right? Theoretically, it wasn't, but theoretically, if it was, it wouldn't be invalidated. So then, ein machshava moelas elami pesach ulam velachutz. Then the only place that you have to worry about walking past is from the inside of the doorway of the ulam to the outside of the doorway of the ulam. This doorway right here was 5 amos thick, so it's not nothing, right? It's 5 amos. It's like the thickness of the sukkah, right? So that was but that would be the only holacha necessary because you could put the shulchan right up at the inside of the door, and then you could burn it right on the outside of the door. That thickness of the doorway is the only transportation required. Now, there's a further opinion that says that the doorway itself has the same holiness as the inside of the doorway, which means that the doorway of the ulam, those 5 amos, have the same holiness as the ulam, and the ulam has the same holiness as the heichal. Hence, theoretically, you could put your shulchan right up into the doorway. So then, ein machshava moelas afilu psia achas. Then there's not even one step of holacha that's necessary because the bazichin could be picked up from the table, brought here, and burned right next to it. Right? Ella bichtei hoshatas yado. The only thing that you would have is the amount just to be able to stick your hand out. That's all. Me'im tim silomer savar holacha shelo beregel lo shma holacha. Now we're going to see later on. The question is going to come up: can you carry something? Is holacha shelo beregel? That means, what if I do the carrying, but I don't take any steps, any physical steps with my feet? Let's say that. So then, ein machshava mo'elas klal, then there's no halacha here at all. Because basically, the only halacha I got to do is from here to here. That's not even a halacha. There's no steps.
We're just saying like extending our hand.
That's correct. That's not even going to count for anything. Do you have a napkin or a tissue or something?
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Yehuda. So that's where that was the reason why I brought the model, because that Gemara is very difficult to explain if you can't see the front, the sections, the different pieces. Okay.
What was the roof used for?
Well, keeping the rainouts. Okay. Okay. We'll discuss all of the floors and all of the different places in the Beis Hamikdash we'll be able to get as we go along, but like my suggestion is to wait on specific questions, what everything is used for, and because we're only on page 14, so we've got 2 years of Seder Zeraim to get there, but it's Seder of Kachim to go through. Once we get through Sefer Kachim, if you don't understand every piece of this Beis Hamikdash, then you can ask. Right? We'll get through all of it. Yes. That's right. Label. There'll be a model. You will have to label all the pieces.
I usually should have done this class.
Okay. So now, Abaye la'amorei derav Chisda. So Abaye asked the Amora. Now, Amora, we said, was a rabbi during the times of the Gemara. They also used that as the title given to the person who was like the assistant of the Rebbe, whose job it was when they would give the shiur. They didn't have the nice microphone system that we had. He would do the announcing. So Abaye would say the shiur, and then the guy next to him would be the guy with the loud voice who would repeat it. So Abaye said to Rav Chisda's Amora, "Boy, me name Rav Chisda, could you do me a favor and ask Rav Chisda the following question? Holacha bizar mahu. Can a non-Kohen carry the blood? Right? Is it it's not necessary. So Marley, Kshera, he says, yeah. If a non-Kohen carries the blood, it's kosher. Umikra misayeni, and I've got a pasuk to support that.
Who's allowed inside the courtyard?
Yeah, fair question. What's the czar doing in there? How's he getting in there?
Yeah.
Right. So the czar's not supposed to be in that area. Right. So the question is going to be if he is in there, right? So then it could be that he's allowed in. Mitzvahs aseh dochelos aseh could be an answer, right? Meaning he's got a positive commandment to do, so therefore it pushes off the negative commandment of him not being there. It's a fair question and point, but we'll get into the discussion. Okay. Like I said, who is he? What's he doing there? Where is he allowed to be? Where is he not allowed to be? That's going to be a conversation we'll discuss. Okay. So, but let's ask the question generally, can he bring he says, yes, he can. And he's got a pasuk. Pasuk says, Vayishchetu esa Pesach, right? That they slaughtered the Korban Pesach. Vayizraku kohanim es abdam, and the Kohanim threw the blood. Mi yadam, from their hands. The Leviim mafshitim, and what you asked where the Leviim were. The Leviim were in the process. They were responsible for trying to remove the skin from all of the korbanos at that point. So therefore, right?
How many amos did the turn to blood from where to where.
The Kohanim are standing right next to the Mizbeach with the third blood, right? We don't want, it's not a distance throw, right? They're going to bring the blood close, and then they're going to throw, they're going to throw it, okay? So the Pasuk says that the Kohanim are the ones who are, right? They're just doing the blood throwing. Up until the blood throwing, somebody else could be handing it to them. A non-Kohen is doing the shechita, a non-Kohen is catching the blood, a non-Kohen is carrying the blood too. Now, we know already that a non-Kohen can't catch the blood. That we already had learned, right? So what would have had to have happened is that the non-Kohen would have shechted it, a Kohen would have caught the blood, and then he would have handed it back to a non-Kohen who could have brought it over to the Kohen standing near the Mizbeach, who then could have sprinkled it. Okay? So that's what he says from this pasuk. Now, Meisiv Rav Sheshas. Rav Sheshas asks that question on Rav Chisda's point. He says, Zar ve'onein shikur ubal mum. If you've got a non-Kohen, an onein, somebody who has a relative who passed away who has not been buried yet, he's not allowed to do any service, and a shikur, somebody who is drunk, right? Ubal mum, and somebody who has a blemish, bekabala beholocha bezrika pasal. So he can't do any of these services. He can't catch the blood. He can't bring the blood to the base to the Kohen, and he can't sprinkle. Not to the Kohen, to the Mizbeach, and he can't sprinkle it. So he's partial because sounds like since they're not a Kohen, cannot do it. V'chein yoshev, so too somebody who's sitting can't do any of the services. V'chein smol, also you can't do it with your left hand, right? Somebody who's doing any service in the left hand. So this is my question. I always have this question. I'm paying attention very closely in the Gemara. You can all pay attention with me if you describe. It never says a lefty can't do it. It says that the service cannot be done with the left hand, right? If he is, a lefty could practice doing it with his right hand, right? If a lefty could get good enough at doing shechita with his right hand, so far as I know, it just says the service has to be done with his right hand,
they want
right?
to be politically correct.
So okay, so can't do it with your left hand. So tiyufta. So that is going to refute Rav Chisda, because Rav Chisda seemed to imply that it was okay. So now we've got to explain, right, how Rav Chisda said such a thing. Rav Chisda krok amar. Rav Chisda's had a pasuk. The pasuk's a pretty good source. So the answer is, it says, de Ovid Maisa Itztaba. So that is where the zar, all he's doing in that pasuk is, and what Rav Chisda may have been referring to is where the non-Kohen is standing as a pillar, meaning he doesn't take any steps, he doesn't do any movements, he doesn't do a thing. If they say to him, here's the shech to catch the blood, they hand it to the non-Kohen and say, here, stand here and hold this. A Kohen will be around to help you, right? And so he just stands there until a Kohen can come and take it from him. But bringing it closer to the Mizbeach is not going to be valid with a non-Kohen. Need to be brought with a Kohen. Okay. Rabbi Rav Yosef, Damri Tavahu, Rabbi and Rav Yosef, both of them say, Holacha Bizar, carrying it by a non-Kohen, is machlokas Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. That should be dependent on our argument between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. I mean, we're all thinking it. And if holacha is not a required service, then why does it have to be done with a Kohen? So Rabbi Shimon Damar Avoda she'efshar levatla lav avodahi. If you can get rid of the service altogether, then it's not a service. Right? So therefore it's ksher bizarre. It should be acceptable if a non-Kohen does it. L'Rabbanan psula, according to the rabbis though, who say that it's required, when it's done, it's required, they would say it's puzzle. So Amar le Abaye, v'shchita davoda she'efshar levatla uksher bizarre. But 1 second, says Abaye, he says, why should that make the difference? You have shchita, when it comes to slaughtering, we know that slaughtering does not need to be done by a Kohen. The slaughtering of the animal does not need to be done by a Kohen. And it's an essential service. So what does that show you? It shows you that essential services, right? An essential service can be done by a non-Kohen. So the fact when you need
to be a certified shechet to do it, no?
I don't know what certified means. You need to be able to do shchita, right? Certification is a man-made process, right? Amar le shchita lav avodahi. He said to him, slaughtering is not a service. It's not in the category of a service. He says, Velo, what are you talking about? It's not? The Amar Rabbi Zera said, Amar Rav, shchitas para bizar psula, that if you do slaughtering of the para aduma, that has to be done by a Kohen. The pasuk says specifically by the para aduma, the red cow, that the slaughtering of the red cow has to be done by a Kohen. Therefore, since if it's done by a non-Kohen, it's puzzle, that must mean it's a service. Which then means that since there are other sacrifices that you don't need a Kohen, now that we know it is a service, that some services can be done by non-Kohanim. The Amar Rav, Allah, Elazar v'chuka ksiv ba. So he says, as Rav said about it, Elazar v'chuka, right? It says the word Elazar and it says the word chok, which means that not only it says that it has to be done by Elazar, and then it says it's a chok, that it is a Zos Chukas Torah. Chuka tells us that it's required, right? Normally we have to say something twice. By Paraduma, by saying Zos Chukas Torah, this is the rule of the Paraduma, tells us these rules that are listed here are required. And if you look into the section of the Paraduma, which we read, we read a few weeks before Pesach, right? And we also read it in the parsha there, Truma Titzav is somewhere in that area, right? If that's in those parshios in that area. So when we do that, all right, now I'm going to say it's wrong. It's not those. That's by anyway. It's by a section of Paraduma, which is right after in when Miriam passes away. Parshas Chukas, I want to say Zukas, right? It's Parshas Chukas, right? I think so too. I think you're right. Okay, so good, right? Yeah. So now that section of Zos Chukas Torah tells me that these are required, and the person who's doing the Paraduma in that section is Elazar. He's a Kohen, so therefore it shows you that the slaughtering has to be done by a Kohen. So
I'm sorry, I just want to understand. So according to if Shechita could be done by a non-Kohen, according to Rav Shimon, it's not Pigel? Is that what
we're not even talking about Pigel? Don't bring up Pigel, right? Pigel, yes, we can do Pigel, and everybody holds you can do Pigel by Shechita. Right. The question that you're asking is if it's a non-service, how does Pigel enter into it? Don't worry about.
Right, but then isn't that what the whole Machlokes was on? Whether it was the definition of what made something Pigel?
We will answer that. Since we described Shechita as a service that you can do Pigel, regardless of whether we call it an avoda or not an avoda, it's subject to the rules of Pigel. Then it's going to be weird because, again, let's finish this argument, and then from the conclusion of the argument, we'll resolve many of these theoretical questions. Right? The question we're asking is it a service or is it not a service? We are now trying to say that based on the fact that it's required by the Paraduma by a Kohen, it must be part of the service. Okay, so now Shani Para, the whole Paraduma is a whole different story. Paraduma is not a korban. Paraduma is dekoche beda kabayasi. Paraduma is a service that at the conclusion of which you have ashes from a cow that you can then use to a purification process. It's not really a sacrifice. It's really Paraduma is a unusual sort of in between. It has a lot of things that are like a sacrifice, but in some ways it's not a sacrifice. So he suggests the reason why it has a different rule is because it's not a sacrifice. Velav called the Kenu. So he says, well, then I've got a Kal V'chomer, right? If you're going to tell me Kache Beda Kabayas Havya Avoda, that if you're going to tell me that slaughtering it requires a Kohen because it's a service, even though it's not even a Korban, so Kache Mizbeach Lav Avoda Hi. So then Shchita by the service of a Korban itself for sure is a service. That's for sure is. So Amar Rav Shisha Braid Rav Idi. So Rav Shisha, the son of Rav Idi, says no. That doesn't. Just because you need a Kohen doesn't make it a service. How, for example, he says Midi Dahava Amaros Negoyim Delava Vodahi by Kahuna. We have, for example, when somebody gets an affliction on their skin and they have to bring it to a Kohen to look at to see if it has tsaras. That requires a Kohen. Certainly, that's not an avoda. That's not a service of a korban. It's just because a Kohen has to be involved doesn't make it automatically a sacrificial service. Okay, now, so v'harei holechas evorim lekeves da'avoda de'efshar levat lahi. He says, well, wait a second. We have a service that, well, we want to call it a service. It's we have when a korban is brought and you cut the animal in pieces, and then the animal is going to be brought in pieces onto the mizbeach. So then bringing those pieces doesn't need to be done because theoretically you could cut the animal right next to the mizbeach, and then that would be all you would need to bring it anywhere. So it's a avoda that you don't need to bring it, right? Upsula bizarre, and even still, a non-Kohen can't do that. Kohen has to do that. Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, "V'ikriva Kohen esakol v'iktir mizbeach." The pasuk literally says very clearly the Kohen has to be the one who brings that up, which means that even according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that holacha is not required, the way we've been discussing it up to this point is maybe even the Rabbanan don't require a Kohen. He says, no, maybe Rabbi Shimon, who says that it's not necessary, still requires a Kohen to be involved, because regardless whether it's necessary or it's not necessary, it needs to be done by a Kohen. V'amar zu halacha sevarim lakeves. This what this pasuk is talking about. Is talking about bringing the limbs close to the mizbeach. So heicha de gully v'heicha de lo gully. The answer is, well, if the Torah tells us that it requires a kohen, then it requires a kohen. But you cannot extrapolate from there on other parts of service that don't say you need a kohen. So if bringing the blood to the mizbeach doesn't say you need a kohen, so then it doesn't necessarily need a kohen. V'lav kol de kain hu. Still, it's a kal v'chomer. Because look, the bringing the limbs to the mizbeach isn't a required part of the service to obtain atonement for your sacrifice. If you leave that part out, the sacrifice is still valid. It's not necessary to the completion of the sacrifice. However, you're going to need a kohen for that. Boikuna holeches dam, bringing the blood, dema'akva kapara. If you don't bring the blood to the mizbeach and sprinkle it on the mizbeach, you can't finish that sacrifice. Nobody gets an atonement, right? That sprinkling the blood is the most important part for the atonement. So therefore, if you don't do that, nobody gets atonement. So then that's a more important service. Lo kolshkin, for sure, it's more significant. Therefore, for sure, it needs a kohen. So itmar nami. So we said Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Elazar, holacha bezar psula. So therefore, Rabbi Elazar says that carrying the blood by a non-kohen is puzzle. Afilu Rabbi Shimon, even according to Rabbi Shimon. Based on that, right? So it's not even an issue, according to Rabbanan, according to Rabbi Shimon, and therefore we don't have to worry about getting into your questions and concerns about whether shechita is an avoda, whether it's not an avoda. The idea, the concept that they were suggesting that maybe even the Rabbanan would hold it's not necessary because it's not an avoda, we sort of dispense with all of that in any event. The shechita is going to be one of our 4 essential services, and it doesn't conflict in any event. That's just don't worry. At the end of the day, you don't have to worry about it. We say ask the following question. Holacha shalo beregel shma holacha. We brought this up before. If I carry the blood, but I don't use my feet, right? Is that considered holacha or not? Olo shma holacha. So tashma. So come and listen. V'chein yoshev, v'chein small puzzle. Somebody who's sitting, right? Somebody who uses their left hand. So those are people who are puzzle. They invalidate it. So ha ome dumya de yoshev, kosher. So that means that if I had a standing person who would be similar to a sitting person, so then it would be kosher. Now, what does that mean? How does a sitting person move the blood? He picks it up here and he puts it over here. No movement. So therefore, if I had somebody, the problem is he's sitting. Not the problem is that he's not moving his feet. So therefore, if he's standing and he picks it up here and he puts it down there, that sounds like it's valid, right? The only issue was his sitting, not the issue of moving without moving his feet. So the answer is no, not necessarily. Dilma Yoshev de Kashayev Meshav. Omed Dumya de Yoshev de Nayid Porta. When he's sitting, the case isn't that he picks it up here and puts it down here. The case is that he's sitting and he scoots himself along the ground, pushes with his feet and scoots himself along the ground. So therefore, well, he's not on wheels, but yeah, but he's sliding himself, right? It's a marble floor, right? So he's sliding himself along that floor. So too, standing is where he shuffles his feet. So therefore, that's the question over there, is shuffling your feet, is that a halakha or not? But if you, for no question that's no good. So shuffling your feet is okay. Sliding along the ground while you're sitting is no good. But this Mishnah, this Mishnah does not discuss the issue of moving it without moving your feet at all. So okay, so that doesn't prove anything.
The process, you don't have to do halacha at all, right?
That's correct.
If you do the shechita right beside the mizbeach,
that's right.
Then you just sprinkle it from where you are without walking. So
correct.
When they're saying sitting, if you're handing it person to person.
So remember that we have to make sure to the distinction, right? Rabbi Shimon was the one who said that since you could do away with it, when you do it, it's not an essential service, right? But even Rabbi Shimon holds that it's now when you're doing it, right? You still have to use a kohen and things. So we're still going to have to do it in the proper process. So we're not going to presume that this argument is dependent on Rabbi Shimon, whether you're required. Rabbi Shimon's going to say you can do it while you're sitting, or Rabbi Shimon holds that you can do it without moving your feet. Whatever the proper process, we're going to at least presume that everyone agrees that it's required. The Rabbanan are suggesting, and they hold that it's, even though you could do without it, when you need to do it, you'd better do it right. Right? You're 100%, right? If I do it right next to it, and then I sprinkle right away, Korban is 100% valid. But 99% of the time, when I'm going to bring the blood, I've got to use a kohen, I've got to use my feet, I've got to do it all the proper way. Correct. Use my right hand. Okay. So now, Toshma, come and listen. Shachat Yisrael. Now, during the Korban Pesach, lot of korbanos. Wherever we talk, like they're bringing in 500,000 korbanos that day in the base of Mikdash. We're talking about a ton of korbanos. Okay, Shachat Yisrael. So how they had a procedure, a process. The regular Jew would do the shechita. You can't waste kohanim on the shechita, right? When it's kosher bazar, right? They must have been standing inside the base of Mikdash and the Azara at that point. So we're going to see that even though we say that the kohanim, the Israelim were generally not, when there were times that they were necessary, they were allowed to be there. When we get to those sections, okay? V'kibel HaKohen, you need the Kohen to catch the blood, so the Kohen catches the blood. Nosno lechavero v'chavero lechavero. The Kohen is handing it to the next Kohen, and the Kohen hands it to the next Kohen. So how is it, right? You see this, right? Assembly line, right? Nobody's moving their feet. Therefore, if you're handing it, getting the blood, it's not, obviously, it is holacha,
Right, but
despite the fact that you're not moving your feet.
Right.
So that's our proof. So the answer is no. What happens here is denayid purta. Everybody takes a little step, right? You just got to, I take it, I step. I take it, I step, right? You go back, step, like little shuffle that you got to do in order to be able to make sure that you're using your feet for the carrying. So then, okay, umay kamash malon. So then what's the point of the story, right? I thought the point of the story was to tell me that they didn't need to use their feet. They were doing an assembly line. The answer is, Barovam Hadras Melech. The answer is, there were so many people, it was so beautiful, it was the honor of the king, that they had this whole process of that they were doing. It was just a beautiful process. That's the reason, that's the point of the mission. Tell me it's really nice how they did it. Tashma. Kibel HaKosher v'nosun l'pasul. Okay, let's say a kosher Kohen catches the blood. He gives it to a pasul person in between.
How's there a kosher Kohen and a non-kosher Kohen?
Well, one could be somebody, as we've had he had a drink of wine before he came into the base of Mikdash, right? That's an example of somebody can't, he's pasul for the avoda, right? We had somebody at a mum, right? We had all kinds, his big day kahuna, right? He could have come in kosher, but his beged, his Kohen beged ripped, right? Any of these kinds of things could invalidate the person from doing the service.
Maybe he's a lefty.
Maybe he's a lefty. I hope not, but we'll see. So we'll see what it is. Okay, then nosan pasul yachzir lekosher. He has to give it back to the kosher kohen, right? In order to do the holacha, he can't, right? So now, so therefore, what does that show you? That we're presuming that what happened is that the kosher kohen handed it to the pasul guy, okay? Now, without moving his feet or anything. So therefore, why does he have to hand it back to the kosher kohen? Why doesn't the kosher kohen just hand it off to the next kosher kohen, right? Sounds like that by bringing it forward to the pasul kohen, that was a halacha, right, which was done by a non-kosher kohen by taking it and moving it, and that's where the problem is. So therefore, he's got to bring it back.
so wait, does
The other
that
Kohen
mean?
was probably in enough service, probably.
Sorry?
Maybe the other Kohen was in enough service.
Well, why he did it is a good question, right? He could have, maybe, right?
Okay, so the receiving part isn't halacha.
So the answer is no. Ema yachzor hakosher via kabla. No, it doesn't necessarily mean he has to hand it backwards. We don't have to backwards lateral, right? We could wind up saying no. He's got to before he moves. Since he hasn't moved his feet, it's not a halacha. Therefore, he just needs to hand it back to the kosher kohen so that he can then move forward.
The next one in line.
Correct. Could be the next one in line or the original kohen again, and just take it from him. But he doesn't have to move it backwards. That transference of a foot between the kosher kohen to the non-kosher kohen doesn't have to be moved backwards. We don't have to go backwards again and redo it.
Is
Okay.
there someone to enforce these rules or something? They just don't
there-
know enough. Oh, we gave it
I
the
suppose everybody sort of has to know it well enough. There were supervisors. There were supervisors. And I would imagine that during most, the Beis HaMikdash got very busy around the Yom Tovim. Probably not around the Yom Tovim. It would have been much more easy to manage. Around the Yom Tovim, everybody in Kahal Yisrael came with their korbanos, and everybody in the Kahal Yisrael is bringing 2 korbanos. So you're talking about millions of people bringing korbanos all of the day before, bringing them all during the days of the Yom Tovim. So the days of the Yom Tovim, all the Kohanim, all the families of all the Kohanim, again, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but all of the Kohanim got called for service. So you've got many, many people. They had divisions, I would imagine, if we go through, right? The heads of each family of the Kohanim, the heads of each household of the heads of the families. Then you had the ones who were the administrators of the Beis HaMikdash. So you had some kind of hierarchy level of responsibilities. You had training protocols in advance. How many years they had academies where the Kohanim would go for training.
Videos, they probably had videos.
That they didn't have. Yeah, the YouTube we didn't have there. So that's correct. Yes. So they had, but I like figuring how many people that were. Well, it's good for us to be able as we go through. If we have all these questions, we'll see is the process. Itmar has been said. Amar Ula, Amar Yochanan, Ula said Rabbi Yochanan. Halacha shelo beregel lo shma halacha. He says that if you carry the blood without moving your feet, that's not considered carrying it. And efshar l'tikuna o lo efshar l'tikuna. If you do it and it's not correct, can you fix it? Right. In other words, can you just bring it back to the place that you were and start again? Right. I mean, it seems fixable, right? Can you, or is it now ruined? That's the question. And now you already moved it forward illegally. Now it's ruined. So Tashma, Kabbalah kosher v'nasan l'apostle, right? We had taught this teaching that if the kosher one caught the blood and then he hands it to the non-kosher Kohen, yachzir l'kosher, he gives it back to the kosher one. Nehi nami de yachzor hakosher v'yikablenu. So he says, we said about that already, that that doesn't mean that he has to hand it backwards and start again. All that it means is that the kosher one can come and get it back. Now, if you're going to tell me there's no way for us to fix it, so if solole, so when he handed it to the Pasal Kohen, that should have invalidated it immediately. That movement forward is invalidated. Mi savar dekai zar gavai. So he says, no, you know why that's not the case? Who says that the non-kosher Kohen is standing closer to the Mizbeach? All the case is that the Kohen hands it to a non-kosher Kohen. The non-kosher guy could be standing further away, right? It's only if you advance it forward that it might invalidate it. By moving it backwards, right? This is like a very line of scrimmage kind of a thing, right? So this is like it goes backwards, it does not a holacha for sure, then he could take it back, right? Lo, de Kaisar Broi, the Zar, the non-kosher guy, is further away. So this doesn't prove whether you can go back and fix it and give it back to a kosher coin or not yet.
So, picturing those NFL guys.
That's exactly right. The guy with the line, he's like, okay, you can move forward, you moved it backwards, right? This is where the Kabbalah is, your line of scrimmage, and you can't go forward over that, right? That's
maybe
the
you
line.
can move it what do you call it? Parallel.
Right, but once you cross, that's the question. Once you cross the line of scrimmage, you can't go back behind the line of scrimmage and now throw. It's too late.
You can make a lateral pass.
You can't. You can lateral behind. You can lateral backwards. But once you cross the line, you can't. You can't. Right. Exactly. You could lateral backwards. That's correct. You could reverse lateral. That's correct at any point. Right. But you can't advance it forward. Right.
The Hail Marys, though, right?
Definitely not. Itmar, Ula said, Rabbi Yochanan, halacha shelo beregel psula. Right, Ula says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that carrying the blood not by walking is possible. Alma lo efshar l'tikuna, which seems to imply that you cannot fix it because he says the blood is possible. Why would he say possible? He should say that it's invalid. Just go back and fix it. Right? He says it's possible. So Eisvei Rav Nachman le'Ula. So Rav Nachman asks Ula the question. Nafshach nishbach min hakli al ritzba. Okay, what happens if the blood, they drop the utensil? Okay, it's filled with blood, and they drop it. Now the blood's all over the floor. Okay, the asfu, and they gather it up, kosher. So then we know the halacha is that you gather that blood back up. The blood is kosher. You can continue on. You don't need that much blood to sprinkle. So therefore, if it's on the floor, you can gather some of it back up, scoop some of the blood back in, and you can continue on with your korban.
It's just a kapara.
So what is?
When the
I said it was a kapara. Actually, it's the opposite. It's not a kapara. so now, halcha b'mayaskina, what are we dealing with over here? So again, the problem is that when you drop the blood, why should you be able to pick it up? After all, when it rolled forward, it went without a kohen. It should be no good at that point, and you can't fix it. So what are you supposed to do? So he says, no. What happens is kishayotza lachutz. So he says, what happens is when you spilled it, it went further away from the Mizbeach, not towards the Mizbeach. So that's the question. He says, Lebroi nafik legavai lo'oil. When you spill something, it only goes one way. Right? It goes in all directions. Again, just that went that way. So the answer is, B'makom madron, it was on a slant, right? It could be in a place where which is a little bit slanted there, and so therefore it rolled away from the mizbeach. Now I don't know if they're implying that the Beis Hamikdash was constructed in such a way that it was slanted away, so that if you spilled the blood, it ran the other direction. Could be. I don't know if I should. There's no nace. Like we have nisim in the Beis Hamikdash. We never heard of a nace that says that when they spilled blood, it always rolled away from the mizbeach. I've never heard that one, right? But especially since you can fix it by bringing another korban. The question is whether you can fix this korban. Okay. Ibai Sema, another possible answer is beguma, right? You could have a edge of the utensil, right? You could have a lip of some kind. So, and so it's it falls into the edge of the lip or whatever, and it stays there, and it pools in one place. So therefore, that you could be able to keep it from rolling away. That could be another answer. Ibai Sema bismicha. That what happens is that it was thick, the blood was already getting thick, and so it wasn't really moving around all that much. It was already coagulating, and therefore it didn't spread out all over the place, right? So now the Gemara wants to know, right? Why does the Tana it's a little bit strange. The Tana is telling us that it's kosher to be able to pick up the blood in all of these unique, strange circumstances. That was his point, right? That usually when a Tana gives us a case, like blood spilling, it's probably the most common example where it's blood and it's spilled and it went in all directions. Why are we explaining? No, the Tana's talking about a very unique, unusual case where the blood only spills in one direction for some reason. So he says, the answer is, Adatani be'idach pirkin, right? The answer is, until the Tana teaches in the next parak, nishbach al ritzpa v'asfo pasol liflug b'didei. So he says there, when the Tana is going to talk in the next parak, it is going to say that if the blood from the neck of the animal, right, if it falls onto the floor, so right when you do shchita, the blood comes out from the beis hashchita, from the place you have to catch it in the utensil. If the blood goes out of the animal onto the floor and you scoop it up at that point into the utensil, that's pasul. That's no good. Why? Because the blood has to go directly into a service utensil.
Like a bucket or something.
Right, a service utensil, right? And then if it spills from the service utensil out, you can gather it back up again. But if it spills right onto the floor, then it's invalid because it was never collected in a service utensil. If it's never collected in a service utensil in the first place, you can't scoop it back up from the floor. Okay, and that's learned from Sukkah. The Sukkah
How could they have even questioned if then being Kabul is an essential service? It sounds like it has to be an essential.
They never questioned that. They questioned halacha. Kabbalah was required.
Okay, I thought they did at one point say whether Kabbalah was not.
So liflug b'didei. So let's discuss it right in this section. Why are they talking about that? Then exactly as we just described. B'med dvar mamurim. When is it that the blood that falls, that the blood is kosher or not kosher? Why are you telling me that the blood is not kosher if it comes out of the animal and falls on the floor? Just in the utensil itself, right? If the blood comes out of the animal, if it goes out away from the mizbeach, then it's kosher. Aval nichnas lifnim, if the blood goes towards the mizbeach, then it's pasul, then it's not. So therefore, tiyufta, so therefore that shows that is a good question on ula, and therefore it's clear that that even if the blood goes towards the mizbeach, it's not pasul, and therefore you can scoop it back up. All you got to do is fix it, is go back further away again and walk it back towards it again. So this idea that he had suggested that it was Rabbi Yochanan's shita that you could not fix an invalid halacha is not correct. Okay, itmar. Halacha shelo beregel. So this idea of halacha that is not by feet is a machlokas between Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan, right? So that is going to be an argument between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan of our Mishnah, right? Because Rabbi Shimon says it's not an avoda, so therefore, since it's not an avoda, we're going to be more lenient with the things that are going to invalidate it. So, behalacha rabasi. So, meaning if there is a long walk, so then kuliyama lo pligi de psula. Then nobody's going to disagree that. Even Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim, there nobody's going to disagree that machshava is going to ruin carrying it to the Mizbeach. Ki pligi b'halacha zutarti. The argument is when there's very little walking to do. So the Chachamim say that if you have this holacha shelo beregel, right? This holacha shelo beregel. If I shecht the korban right next to the mizbeach, so in that circumstance, Rabbi Shimon says holacha is not necessary. Therefore, if I do a holacha that doesn't require me to walk anywhere, right? It's just a holacha shelo beregel, as we've been discussing. Holacha shelo beregel. Rabbi Shimon says that's not a holacha. Therefore, if I have the wrong intent during that holacha, that is not going to invalidate, according to Rabbi Shimon. According to the Chachamim, halacha shelo beregel, this is still going to be you're still doing a halacha, and it's still going to invalidate it. Now, however, the big chiddush, the new information here is that even according to Rabbi Shimon, if the animal is slaughtered far away from the mizbeach, if you're carrying it, that is considered an avoda, and the machshava is going to invalidate it. Which we sort of were under the impression that he was just saying, no, halacha never invalidates. He says, no, if it's a long walk, so then it's going to invalidate it, right? Since you need that walk. Okay. Machaku Allah b'ma'rava. They laughed about that, right, in Eretz Yisrael, about this idea. Elachatas. So because here's the question, right? The question would be, Elachatas ha'of. If I have a bird offering, that's a sin offering, depsula b'machshava, that in that circumstance, right, that sprinkling the blood, when I do the sprinkling of the blood, machshava, the invalid thought, is going to invalidate that offering, right, because it's a chatos. So invalid offering is going to invalidate it. Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon, hechi mishkachas la. So what would be the circumstance? How is that we know that it's the case that an invalid thought is going to invalidate that offering? It's a korban chatos. But according to Rabbi Shimon, how do you wind up with that? When you shech the bird, it doesn't have a tremendous amount of blood. So therefore, if you do the shechita, they used to do malika, right, which is where they use the fingernail in order to do the shechita of the bird. So the blood doesn't come spurting out. There's no blood to be able to carry, right? You have a bird, and you then have to bring the bird close to the mizbeach, and you squeeze the blood out of the bird onto the side of the mizbeach. Okay, there's not a lot of blood there for use.
If you're using your fingernail, is it still because that's a kosher shechita? Because usually you use a knife.
It is not a kosher shechita, but it is kosher for a korban. Right. And we will discuss that the irony of it, that is a kohen can eat that, korban chatos. But if you use that as a regular shechita, it would be not kosher. Okay, so it's only, that bird becomes kosher only because it's for a korban. Okay, so now what happens is like this. If he has this intent or has thought about it. So before the blood comes out, so the lo klumi, then that's meaningless. He hasn't done any holacha. There's nothing to do. Ibasar de nafak dam. If now the blood is already out, so this is the machshava is going to ruin this bird once the blood starts coming out. Is avidale mitzvaso. So then he's already done the blood appointment onto the mizbeach, because in order to get the blood, he's basically squeezing the blood right onto the mizbeach. It's done. There's no point at which the thought can invalidate this blood of this korban of this chatas oaf.
I thought you were only pouring the blood out from the bucket, not from the bird itself.
No, there's no bucket with a bird.
No, the blood. I'm talking about the blood.
Yeah, there's no bucket for the blood. It's
the bird. You hold it and it spurts out directly.
Right. Well, no. Well, it doesn't spurt. Right. That's the blood. The birds have. I guess that's. I don't know. We have to do like to take a look, and that's a YouTube if anybody wants to watch grocery movies. But apparently, right, the blood is so little that you needed to squeeze it in order to be able to get the blood out. Right.
You don't collect it in a bucket.
Okay. So.
It's pretty.
So then. My kusha, what's the problem there? Dilma mi parish ad mizbeach. The answer is, well, there is a moment where he squeezes the blood, it gets to the top of the neck, and then you have to put it on there's a moment in between where the blood comes out, and then you put it on the mizbeach. That could be your moment. right? That's what we're talking about. So, the haboy mine Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera, because right. And then now they're going to bring a proof that the service is not complete until the blood actually gets to the mizbeach. So when it comes out of the bird's neck, if you, let's say you have the bird and then you do like this, the fact is that the avoda of sprinkling is not complete until the blood gets to the mizbeach. How do you know that? Because dehaboy mine Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera haya mazeh v'nikta yodo shel mazeh ad shelo igia dam le'avir. Let's say a person was doing sprinkling of the blood. Another graphic circumstance. I could have come up with other ways of invalidating the coin. His hand gets chopped off while the blood is on its way to the mizbeach.
His hand gets chopped off?
Yes.
Imagine.
How'd that happen?
I don't know.
Imagine.
There are knives everywhere in the Beis Hamikdash. Dangerous place.
There are a lot of work hazards.
As long as they have WSIB insurance, they're pretty good.
And if he was a lefty, it's even worse.
So, Mahu, what will be the halacha in that circumstance? Because he already sprinkled it. But now, before the blood, we're going to have a lot of these cases where something happens, where the beginning of the action took place, where everything was in good shape, and then something happened before the completion of the action that, if it had happened at first, then for sure it wouldn't be good. If his hand was severed before he sprinkled it, that would not be anything, right? But he sprinkled, the blood is in midair, and his hand gets severed. Now, do we say that now retroactively, or now, because the blood is, so what happens? V'amrlei psula, he said it's puzzle. My taima, why? Because vehiz of anason be'inon. The pasuk says he sprinkled and it gets placed. Sprinkling is the placement of the blood on the mizbeach. So therefore, that shouldn't be. So therefore, there's clearly a zone in which your chatas, your bird offering chatas, can have a shalom lishma mindset. What was the problem that these people in Eretz Yisrael were laughing about? We don't understand. So, what is it that we're really struggling with? What is it that they were so like? Why is it they were laughing about this halacha? Ki also Rav Papa of Rav Huna, Breder Rav Yeshua mi Bei Rav. So Rav Papa and Rav Huna, they came from Rav's yeshiva Amri Hainu Chucha. This was the reason why they were laughing. It was a different one because behalacha rabasi lo pligi, v'ha pligi behalacha rabasi pligi. Says what was their presumption? Their presumption is that there was a big news flash here, that the Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon didn't argue that halacha is necessary and can invalidate with a mind, with thinking about halacha inappropriately if you're walking it from a far off place to the Mizbeach. All this time we've been presuming that Rabbi Shimon says halacha, you can't invalidate a korban when you're doing halacha because there are times when it's not necessary.
Right.
Not that when it's not necessary, then you can't invalidate it, but when it is necessary, you can. So that's what they were saying. That's you're missing the point of the argument between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim. So, Ella b'holacha zutarti kuliyama lo pligi. If it was rather, what you have to say is that when it comes to this if the halacha is right next to the mizbeach, no one disagrees to lo pasla. That the way that you have to look at it is everyone says, look, if you just picked up the blood here and sprinkled it on, and it's a halacha shelo beregel, even the Rabbanan are going to say that's not going to nullify. There's no halacha to do here that it's going to ruin your intent. Ki pligi b'halacha rabasi. The argument between Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon is when you had to take a long walk. That where the Chacham say, well, now that you have to take a long walk, then your mind, if you have the wrong intent for the korban, for the contempt for the wrong korban, it can invalidate it. And that's where Rabbi Shimon says, no, even that doesn't invalidate. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
Holicho, I'm going to try to get, if it's okay to try to finish, we can try to finish the parak of this as we start a little bit, right? So, Holichu zar ve'echziru, since there's plenty of food here anyway, right? Holichu zar ve'echziru kohen. Okay, let's say a non-kohen, right? So he is he starts to carry the blood towards the mizbeach, okay? And the kohen now brings it back, okay? So because they did it wrong, right? So now he comes back and to where he was, v'chazer v'holicho, and now he brings it again. Pligi ba. There's an argument on that. B'nei Rabbi Chia v'Rabbi Yanai. right? The between the children of Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yanai. Chad Amar kosher, one says it's kosher. V'chad Amar pasul, one says it's pasul. Once you already started the halacha invalid, you cannot go back and fix it. One says nope, you can go back and fix it. Mar savar efshar l'takuno, mar savar lo efshar l'tikuno. That was basically the question we were asking before. Can you go back and fix it? This is where you are. Next question. Holichu kohen, right? Let's say a kohen brought it. Vechziru. And then a non-Kohen, the Kohen brings it back. He brings it close, and then he brings it back. Then, now the non-Kohen comes, and he brings it forward again. So, what happens in that case? Because it was already brought. So now we say once it was already brought, you can't unbring it. So now it's the opposite of the other case. Amar Rav Shimi Barashi, so Rav Shimi Barashi says, L'divrei machshir pasul, l'divrei pasul machshir. The guy who said before that if you bring it back, it undoes what you started. So now, in this case, when the Kohen brings it back, he undoes the fact that he brought it forward. Now he's undoing that. So when the second guy comes and he's the non-Kohen, so then it's invalid. According to the guy before who said when the non-Kohen went forward, that invalidates, you can't bring it back. When the Kohen brought it forward in the second case, the first time, then you can't undo that. Which means if a non-Kohen then brings it back to where it was, that's fine. So he says it's just a matter of whether you can bring it back or not. So the positions flip. So Rava says no. Even according to the opinion that says that when a non-Kohen brings it forward, the Kohen can't bring it back, he still holds that in the case where the Kohen does bring it forward in the first place and brings it back, and then the Zar moves it forward again, that's also pasul. My time, what's the reason? Because the hot tzarich le'am tuye, because the last one is the one that counts. Right? So therefore, even if the Kohen, in the first case, the fact is that the Zar brought it forward, that invalidates it. You can't uninvalidate it. But in the second circumstance, if the Kohen brought it forward and he brings it back, you're right, it's not invalid. But then at the end of the day, a Zar does bring it forward again from wherever it is. That invalidates it. So that's not going to be good. Amalei Reb Yirmiyah l'Ravashi. So, well, some say we change it from Rav Yirmiyah to Ravina, which makes more sense. Ravina says to Rashi, Hachi Amar Rav Yirmiyah. This is what Rav Yirmiyah Mivdifti said. Hot tzarich la'am tuye. Right. The logic here is that the Kohen has to be the one who brings it to the Mizbeach at the end of the day. If he brings it in the first place, brings it back, you can't have a non-Kohen bring it again, right? The Kohen has to, at the end of the day, the final bringing has to bring a Kohen. So that is Machlokas Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbanan. That should be an argument between the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer. D'Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Hamahalech b'mokum shetzarich lahalech machshava poselis." That's the end of our Mishnah. The end of our Mishnah says that if you are doing holacha, where in a circumstance where the holacha is required, the bringing the blood is required, so then it invalidates it. Makom she'ein tzarich lahalech, but if you're in a circumstance where you don't need to do holacha, right? So then, and we're presuming at this point, meaning because the Kohen already brought it once, so you're now bringing it a second time. Mm-hmm. So then ein machshava poselis, right? So then it doesn't. So if Amar Rava, and Rava says, Hakol modim kibul bachut behichnisu bifnim zeu hiluch shetzarich lahalech. He says that if we're going to use the words chutz and bifnim in the non-standard way. Outside doesn't mean outside, but further away. If you caught it, and everybody agrees that if you caught the blood far away from the mizbeach, and you bring it close to the mizbeach, so then that is hiluch shetzarich. That is necessary hiluch. Kibul bifnim votzio lachutz. But if you catch the blood and it's close to the mizbeach and you bring it further away, zeh she'ein tzarich lahalech. That is when you don't need it. Okay, meaning, right? If you did the shechita right here and some non-Kohen took it and brought it way out here, then that doesn't invalidate. Then that's everyone agrees that that's not necessary. Nobody should have done that, and therefore that doesn't invalidate anything for anyone. Lo nechlaku. The argument between them is ela keshechnisu v'chazar v'hotziu. What happened is that they brought it close and then they brought it back out again. Mar savar hatzarich la'am tuye. One says, look, if they brought it close and then they brought it back away again, well, you need to bring it close again. How are you going to sprinkle the blood if you don't bring it close again? You still need to bring it. Umar Savar, lav ki tzarich la'avoda dami. It's not the same. Once you've already brought it close the first time, now it's not really a service that you need to bring it close. It's just a practical thing. You got to get this blood close. Therefore, it's not really a service, and therefore, if it gets followed by a non-Kohen the second time, it wouldn't invalidate it. So, Esve, Abaye. So Rabbi asked the question on this. He says that this idea that within Rabbi Eliezer's shita is this argument about whether a non-Kohen can now, bring this blood close once it's already been brought close the first time. He says, I have a problem with that. Rabbi Eliezer says, he says, if you're bringing the blood close in a circumstance where it's necessary, then the intent ruins it. Ketzad, what's the circumstance? Kibul bachutz v'chnisu lifnim. If he caught the blood outside, further away from the mizbeach, and brings it close, zehu hiluch shetzarich lahalich. That is necessary, right? Kibul b'fnim v'otzia lechutz, zehu hiluch she'ein tzarich lelich. But if he catches it close to the mizbeach and brings it further away, that's not necessary. So that means, if that's what the Mishnah explains is the case, so ha chazer v'chnisu, if they needed to bring it back close again, so hiluch shetzarich lahalichu, that would be bringing it close again. So then that's not, right? In other words, the way that we're understanding Rabbi Eliezer is the problem with a non-Kohen is always bringing it closer, but not moving it away. If you're bringing the blood further away from the mizbeach, that doesn't nullify it. But that means that under all circumstances, not when the Kohen moved it forward first time and then now he brought it back, now you want to bring it again. It's even in the circumstances where the blood was brought forward and moved back, the non-Kohen can't do it. Always you need to have a Kohen who brings it close. That's what he considers to be tzarich, when the blood needs to get to the mizbeach in order to be brought. So that's what the Brisa says. So it doesn't agree with your interpretation of Rabbi Eliezer. So he answers, Amar lei, Itan Yitanya, you're right. If there's a Brisa that disagrees with me, then I guess you're right. And therefore he ends it that way. And that's the end of the first parak.
So I was going to say, there wasn't, I thought at the beginning, like going back quite a few daf, there was an argument whether